Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs for the 2025 legislative session. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Carter, DeLong, De Silva, Edgeworth, Flanagan, Gallant, Golding, Gurr, Hunt, Jackson, Karras, Kasama, Wynn, Chair Considine.
I am here. We are all here. Good morning and welcome to the audience in Carson City, those joining via video conference in Las Vegas, and those listening over the internet. I would like to begin with some housekeeping measures. First, please check and silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. When testifying, please turn the microphone on and clearly state your name and any affiliation for the record. Turn the microphone off each time you are done speaking. If you are providing handouts, please ensure that hard copies are available for members of the public. Electronic copies should have been submitted to our committee manager by 9 a.m. yesterday for our committee members. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we disagree with someone else's position. I encourage committee members to ask questions and engage with the material presented. If you have a follow-up question, please flag those for me so that we can ensure we balance our time effectively during today's meeting. And committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not interpret this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. And with that, let's get started. Today, we will hear two bills. First, we will hear Assembly Bill 422, which revises provisions relating to the Civil Air Patrol, followed by Assembly Bill 427, which revises provisions relating to public financial administration. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 422. To present this measure, we have Speaker Yeager. Please go ahead when you are ready.
Good morning, Chair Considine, Vice Chair Wynn, and members of the Government Affairs Committee. My name is Steve Yeager. I represent Assembly District 9, which is in Southwest Las Vegas, and it is an honor to present Assembly Bill 422 to you this morning. With me at the table to my left is Brad Spires, who has a long history with the Civil Air Patrol and will be telling you more about his work with the Civil Air Patrol, and also we'll be talking about a friendly amendment. Before I get started, if I could, Chair, I just wanted to thank this committee as well as the committee staff for all the work that you've done so far this session. I know there's a lot of work ahead of us, but I know what it's like to be in committee every morning at 8 o'clock and hear a lot of bills, so I wanted to take an opportunity to thank you and say that it's good to be with you here this morning. I have a rare morning off of Ways and Means and decided to spend it here in the Committee on Government Affairs, so thank you for having me. So on to the bill. I did submit a fact sheet on Nellis. You should have an opportunity to look at that. It looks like this. It talks a little bit about the Civil Air Patrol, which is a congressionally chartered, federally funded 501c3 nonprofit corporation that is the civilian auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force. The Civil Air Patrol operates in all 50 states, including Nevada, of course. And also on that fact sheet, I've included facts about the Nevada branch of the Civil Air Patrol. And just to highlight a couple of things on there, there are 394 adult members, 427 cadets, 96 aircrew personnel, and 550 emergency responders here in Nevada. Now, I want to talk a little bit more globally about what is the Civil Air Patrol, what is their mission. The charter of the Civil Air Patrol is based on three tenets. Number one, emergency services. Number two, aerospace education. And number three, cadet programs. Civil Air Patrol, also known as CAP, which I know is also the Children's Advocacy Project and Legal Aid. So maybe I'll just say Civil Air Patrol because I don't want to confuse anyone. So Civil Air Patrol volunteer missions under emergency services have greatly expanded in the last couple of decades. To support these missions, they actually have the largest fleet of Cessna general aviation aircraft in the world, with over 500 Cessnas of different models. Civil Air Patrol pilots, observers, and scanners are highly trained in these aircraft. Additionally, ground support from members ensures effective mission success. Now, you may not know that after the Twin Towers came down on September 11th, the first aircraft to fly over the devastation was actually a Civil Air Patrol plane and crew, and their photography and firsthand reporting were critical to the rescue efforts that happened in the days after 9/11. In addition to the search and rescue efforts that most of the public is aware of, Civil Air Patrol provides the following support. They have Green Flag Las Vegas, based out of the North Las Vegas Airport. This ongoing mission provides training for the active duty military ground personnel that will be employing drones and guiding aircraft into targeted areas. They have Special Event Interceptor training. Civil Air Patrol crews are employed as slow-moving targets over special events to train the fighters on intercept procedures. For instance, working with the Air Force for the Super Bowl event each year to make sure that that airspace remains safe. United States Air Force non-rated officer pilot qualifying. The Air Force uses Civil Air Patrol instructor pilots and aircraft to provide initial evaluations for current United States Air Force officers that are applying for flying positions. The candidates follow the Air Force prepared syllabus of flight training and evaluation. If approved by the Civil Air Patrol instructors, they are given the opportunity to progress with their applications. And then also FEMA support. To the extent FEMA is going to continue to exist, Civil Air Patrol crews provide disaster relief and damage photography for environmental events. And then in terms of the education component, for aerospace education, Civil Air Patrol hosts open houses at our local airports for the school systems. Students receive ground instruction and get to sit in our aircraft to get familiar with them. The cadet program enables the cadets to progress through glider pilot and fixed-wing training. They also learn ground team search, drone, and rocket procedures, all the while learning really important leadership qualities. There are several cadets from our Douglas Squadron that will have or will be attending the military academies in the future. And most importantly, all of these tasks are accomplished by volunteers, which brings us to the bill. The bill seeks to ensure that Civil Air Patrol volunteers don't have to perform their volunteer services while being worried about repercussions at their regular job. So the bill itself is pretty simple. I'll go through the couple of sections and then I'll hand it over to Mr. Spires. Section 1 of the bill ensures that the volunteer can take a leave of absence for up to 10 days for training and 30 days for emergency mission work, and this is the important part, without losing their position, seniority, or accrued leave or benefits of their job. Now, the volunteer has to provide adequate documentation, and the employer does have the option of treating it as an absence of unpaid leave if they wish to. So there are checks and balances here. And then it also provides the employee with the civil right of action if an employer does not accommodate what is anticipated in Section 1 of the bill. And then Section 2 of the bill indicates that an employer cannot prohibit a Civil Air Patrol volunteer from participating in search and rescue activities if they are related to the membership in the Civil Air Patrol and the employee otherwise meets the requirements of Section 1 of the bill. So hopefully that's a relatively simple bill for a Tuesday morning, and with your permission, Chair, I would love to hand this over to Mr. Spires to give you a little bit more flavor of what it is like to serve in the Civil Air Patrol.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for helping us with this bill. An interesting thing, I'll cover a couple of things that he mentioned. Again, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Spires, I'm the Government Affairs for the state of Nevada for Civil Air Patrol. I retired reserve military, flew F-4s in the active and with the Nevada Air National Guard, and retired out of the reserve. Been flying with Civil Air Patrol for 18 years now. I'm going to cover what it's like to do a mission. Just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, thanks for covering it better than I could have, sir. Thank you. And an interesting one, the training that we're doing for non-rated Air Force active military officers. Our squadron at the Douglas County Composite Squadron has actually taken 2 of our flight instructors and 2 of our airplanes back to Lackland Air Force Base on 3 different occasions. They have Air Force officers that are not flying rated that want the opportunity to become pilots, and they go through a 2-week period, and if the Civil Air Patrol instructor pilots give them an okay, they can go forward and enter into Air Force pilot training. So we cover a ton of things that we never did. And 9/11 was when that changed. When we were the first airplane up, the Air Force realized that we can do a lot of stuff. So we're now actually part of the Air Force multiplier with Reserve, Guard, and Civil Air Patrol. That being said, what do we really do, and what's the purpose of the bill? Let me tell you, the best way to do this is to go through a quick scenario. You may all be familiar with about 6 weeks ago, the gentleman who left Las Vegas in his single-engine airplane and headed north and never arrived at any destination. The way this works is either the ATC, Air Traffic Control, FAA will go through our Maxwell Air Force Base and start a search, or local law enforcement can do that. And that's what happened in this case. A rancher up north of Tonopah by Mount Jefferson heard an airplane go over. And airplanes never go over his ranch. So he called the Nye County Sheriff. The Nye County Sheriff began a follow-up and reached out to Civil Air Patrol and said, we need you guys to give us some assistance. So what happens is our operations for the state begins the process of mobilizing. I get a text on my phone, that particular one was 11:30 at night, saying, are you available? At the same time that they're reaching out to air crews for a pilot, an observer, and a scanner for each of our aircraft to conduct a search, at the same time that's happening, the operations for the state is organizing. It takes a whole lot to get an airplane airborne. We need a plan. We need to know where we're going. We need to be assigned what particular area that we're going to be searching in so that we know we're comfortable searching where there's not another aircraft in the same vicinity. Okay? At the same time that they are doing that, we try to be airborne within 2 hours of being notified as soon as we can fly. And we don't fly at nighttime because there's nothing you can see for search. But we were airborne at 0800 the next morning. We flew multiple flights, and I flew 2 of those. It takes a whole lot of people. We have people at the squadron that are working the radios. We have people on the ground crew that are helping us, and then flying. So that's what goes into a sortie. The important part of that is because we are limited on the number of pilots, observers, and scanners that can appear at any one time, it's critical that those that are aviators and our ground team members, that they can get away from work to go help people. In the wintertime, the first couple of days are really, really critical for folks on the ground. And it's not just airplanes. We search for hikers. I flew a couple of sorties 2 years ago. You remember the professor from Oklahoma that got lost up on top of Boundary Peak. So that's what we do, and that's the criticality of us being able to have employers that will let us volunteer our time. I'm open to any questions you may have. We do have a friendly amendment, again, brass spires continuing, and that is the way the bill was really initially written was search and rescue. But what has happened again since 9/11, and the Air Force has brought us in to be a force multiplier with 1st Air Force, we get more and more things that we do. And if you watch the Super Bowl this year, in the pregame, they were showing the F-15s that were flying up and had some pilots they were talking to. Well, we were the targets for that, where we fly as a target for somebody that's a bad guy that has an airplane full of explosives to go blow stuff up. The other thing is we fly a lot of FEMA stuff. I've flown up in Humboldt County when we had the floods several years ago, taking pictures so that FEMA knows where best to put their efforts. So the friendly amendment is to add, in addition to search and rescue, disaster relief. And that disaster relief will cover any of the other sorties that we may be assigned to.
And Chair Steve Yeager, for the record, that concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. A lot of information in there. Thank you. We do have a few questions on the committee. Our first question is from Assembly Member Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I think my question is a point of clarification, just so I understand how the language is structured in the bill. It has to do with, I guess it's subsection 2, section 2, subsection 2, the paragraph that reads, if the employer chooses not to allow the employee to participate in the search and rescue activities, they are required to notify the employee as soon as practicable. And then the following section says basically that an employer shall not prohibit. So I guess I'm wondering why 2 can't just come out for 3? Or am I misreading that?
Steve Yeager, for the record, I kind of wrestled with that language a little bit myself, but I think probably the best thing to do is, Chair, if you would maybe allow legal counsel to speak on the meaning of that, because I interpreted it one way, but I don't want to put something on the record that is inaccurate in terms of how to interpret Section 2 and how subsection 2, Section 2 is interacting with subsection 3.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Delap, Committee Counsel. The way I'm reading it is subsection 2 only applies except as otherwise provided in subsection 3. So subsection 3 is saying that an employer shall not prohibit an employee from participating if the search and rescue activities are related to the membership of the employee in the Civil Air Patrol Unit and the employee has otherwise met the requirements of Section 1 of this Act. And then subsection 2 is saying if the employer chooses not to allow the employee to participate in search and rescue activities during his or her normal working hours, the employer shall notify the employee. So I think that the way that the 2 are interacting, or at least the way that I'm reading it, is that the only time that an employer or that like an employee would be allowed to continue to participate in search and rescue activities would be as long as they're doing it pursuant in accordance with the requirements in Section 1 of the Act. So if they were trying to do it with another organization, then I don't think that it would be permitted.
Thank you. Assembly Member, did you have any follow-ups?
I do not. I think it remains as confusing as it did when I first asked, but thank you, Madam Chair.
We move on to Assembly Member Kasama for the next question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this really great presentation. I guess my question would be, why didn't we do this sooner? Because I think it's a really good idea. And years and years ago, I used to audit the Civil Air Patrol at McCord Air Force Base. And, you know, having this additional group to help with our state's needs for emergencies, disaster, search and rescue is so critically important for all of us to support this organization. And so I heartily do that as well. I did just kind of following up with my colleague's comment too, and I think when I look at the proposed amendment, I think you'd have to add and disaster relief to Section 2, subsection 2, as well as not only 3, because you've got search and rescue in there, but you'd have to add disaster relief as well. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Steve Yeager, for the record, that's an excellent suggestion. We'll make sure that we get that added. And I just did want to note, I would love to take credit for this bill, but it was brought to me by Mr. Spires. So, you know, I think all of you who've been in this building a long time know that some of the best ideas that we have for bills come from folks who reach out. So the reason we didn't do it sooner is I didn't know about it sooner, but it was a great suggestion and happy to do this. And, you know, I just think about the couple of examples that he mentioned about search and rescues. You know, if you're those family members, you want someone out there ASAP and you don't want to have to wait for everything to work on the state level. So this being sort of an additional service and one that can activate quickly. Hopefully you find the person, but it gives comfort, I think, to the family to know that there's someone out there looking as soon as possible. And we certainly don't want it to be a hindrance that you're worried about going to work the next morning at 8 o'clock when they need you up in an airplane searching for someone who's lost.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Speaker and Lieutenant Colonel, for being here this morning. I think it's great. I'm just looking at the language of the bill. I just want to, maybe for my own curiosity, just because I'm an employer myself, that is there a reason why we're matching it with the federal fiscal year versus the calendar year? And that is on line 11.
Steve Yeager, for the record. It's a good question. I think that was just a choice of how it was drafted. It was not something I asked to be included that way, but I think we'll try to get to the bottom of that and figure out if that makes more sense. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but not everyone in the state operates on a federal fiscal year. And now that I say that, I'm not even really sure what the federal fiscal year is. I'm so used to the state fiscal year, so I don't know if it's the same or not.
Follow up, Chair. Just for clarify, federal fiscal year start October 1 and ends on September 30th of the following year. So as an employer, like you said, Speaker, the average employer may not know that fiscal calendar. So in terms of making sure that they're in compliance, either we clarify that with actual dates or go calendar year, just so that it's easier for upkeeping of records. So that was my suggestion.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Steve Yeager, for the record, great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Karras.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for a great presentation. I don't think anyone who does this kind of service should be penalized for going to the aid of others. First of all, my original question was the exact same one that Assemblymember Kasama had. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to interpret section 2, 1 and 2 and 3 as far as I understand it, and please let me know if I have it right. Because I'm reading it as when an employee starts working, he has to tell his employer that he's part of a volunteer unit. And so then in section 2, the employer has to tell the employee right away when he's first getting hired or first hired that he will not be allowed to do it other than in working hours or after working hours. And then 3 goes back to the employer can't prohibit him. So to me, it seems like it's going to lead into some civil actions, because the way I read it is if you take time off and you've let your employer know, you should be able to take the time off. You may not get paid, but you should be allowed without losing your job. But I do also think that section 2 is a little murky, because it's almost like the employer now says, we're not going to let you, so subsection 3 isn't going to work, you know? So just let me know about that. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve Yeager, for the record. Thank you for that question. I'm going to get with legal and try to figure out exactly what the impact of Section 2 is and how we might want to word it. When I first read it, what I thought was if someone's starting a job or they're already in a job and they're not part of the Civil Air Patrol, they could tell the employer, I want to do this, and the employer could say no. And then I think if that's the case, they don't have to follow the bill. I'm not sure about that, so I want to make sure, but I think the intent is right. The intent of the bill as a whole is if you're already in the Civil Air Patrol, you should be able to take advantage of this bill. But I think there is an open question about what if you want to join the Civil Air Patrol? And I think what Section 2 says is you have to tell your employer that, and your employer can say, I'm not okay with you taking time off of work. So my guess is there's a legal reason there in terms of employment, at-will employment. So I'll get some more information about that. And it makes me happy that you're asking these questions, because it tells me that you read the bill. I was struggling with this too, and I didn't get a chance to follow up, unfortunately, before a committee. But I'll get a good answer to that, and we'll come back with any clarification. Even if there's not an amendment, what I will commit is getting this committee information about how to interpret the language that's in there right now, whether it's what I just said on the record or whether it's something else. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Yes, we have one additional question from Assemblymember Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Oh my God, awesome presentation. Thank you guys so much. I'm sort of like going to piggyback off of Assemblymember Kara's, because I was thinking that nowhere in the bill is they have a limit on how many employees within a single workplace can take the cap related leave of absence at the same time. Is there anything there that I may have missed?
Steve Yeager, for the record, there's not any limitation in the bill on that, although Lieutenant Colonel might have a sense of, I'm going to guess with the amount of folks we have, there probably aren't employers that have numerous Civil Air Patrol volunteers, but Lieutenant Colonel, if you want to speak a little bit about that, you're better to answer that question, I think.
Brad Spires for the record. Yes, ma'am, I don't see that would be an issue. The numbers of folks that this impacts is very limited, but so are the air crews that we have available to fly. So that was one of the reasons for this. I think that the members, the way this came about is we have a new wing commander who came from Virginia, and Virginia had this bill in place there for some years. I think there's 14 states that have it. So the idea for him was to provide that same protection that he had when he was involved in leadership in Virginia. So I don't see that, but I'm not the bill drafter, so I'll defer to the speaker for that answer, ma'am.
I mean, Steve Yeager, for the record, happy to consider that. I have not, we'll see what happens at the hearing, you never know, but I haven't had anybody approach me yet to ask to make that change. But, you know, if that's a concern of anyone out there or the committee, certainly happy to talk about potentially adding that to the bill in some fashion, but it is not yet there.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for the presentation. We will move on to testimony on AB 422. Testimony can be provided here in person in Carson City via video conference in Las Vegas or over the phone. Further instructions for providing testimony on a bill can be found on the agenda. First, we will begin to hear testimony in support of AB 422 here in Carson City. Would anybody in Carson City like to provide testimony in support? Seeing no one approach the table, we will move on to Las Vegas, and seeing no one in Las Vegas, we will move on to AVH. Is there anyone on the line in support of AB 422?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. We have no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to testimony in opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to provide testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 422? Seeing no one and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the lines in opposition to AB 422?
The public line is open and working. We have no callers for opposition.
And we will move on to testimony in neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral on AB 422? Seeing no one approach and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the line on the bill?
Chair, the public line is open and working. We have no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. Would the sponsor like to make any final remarks? Okay, then I will close the hearing on AB 422 and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 427, which revises provisions relating to public financial administration. Thank you, Speaker, for staying with us to present this bill, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning again, Chair Considine, Vice Chair Wynn, and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. For the record, I'm Steve Yeager. I represent Assembly District 9, which, as you know, is in Southwest Las Vegas. And I'm pleased to present Assembly Bill 427 to you this morning. Admittedly, this bill is a little bit different than the one we just covered. And with me at the table, I have Jeff Sailing, who's going to offer some testimony after I go through my remarks, and he will be here to help me answer questions as well. So Assembly Bill 427, the goal is to provide much needed investment in Nevada's small businesses in what are admittedly challenging economic times. I did submit, for the record, Chair, an explainer, which I hope your committee found helpful, because I think sometimes these bills, when you dive into them, can be a little confusing to figure out what is happening. But I'm going to sort of at a very high level take you through the history of this bill, and it'll follow what's on the explainer if anyone wants to follow along. But back in the 76th legislative session in 2011, none of us were here in this building then. I think some of our Senate colleagues were here. But the legislature then authorized the creation of a corporation for public benefit to provide private equity funding for businesses in Nevada through the passage of Senate Bill 75. That was under then Treasurer Kate Marshall, who later became our Lieutenant Governor. This act of the legislature became what is known today as the Nevada Capital Investment Corporation, or NCIC, which I think also is an acronym for a television show, but I'm going to use it here to mean the Nevada Capital Investment Corporation because I don't want to say that over and over. The primary purpose of the NCIC is to identify and invest in businesses currently located in Nevada, as well as those seeking to relocate here in the state. Additionally, this vehicle allows for those investments made to businesses to come back to the state, yielding greater returns for the permanent school fund, while also working to increase economic development and job creation efforts right here at home. Typically, the state is constitutionally prohibited from loaning or investing public money directly to private businesses. However, after SB 75 passed in 2011, the state treasurer's office went to court and obtained a judicial determination that dollars from the state's permanent school fund could legally be used to provide private equity funding to support Nevada-based businesses. So there was no investment made until that judicial determination came out that it was going to be okay under our state constitution. So at that time in 2011, when the NCIC was formed, it was capitalized with the transfer of up to $50 million from the state's permanent school fund. And this amount actually was increased to $75 million in the 2021 session. Some of us were here for that session, with the passage of Senate Bill 68. So over the last 13 years, the NCIC has largely been focused on providing private equity funding to businesses rather than early stage venture capital funding. That means that the state of Nevada, under the NCIC, often will not invest in a business that is in the early or middle stages of development, and much more in need of investment to expand operations and hire more people. I imagine that many of you have talked to folks who are starting their own business, and access to capital is a huge obstacle. Usually the amount of capital they need is too small, frankly, for the bigger banks to want to loan it. So this seeks to fill that gap. AB 427 would change access to capital. As I said, as I meet with small business owners throughout my district in the state, I hear about the challenges that they're facing. Rising inflation, an erratic tariff policy being undertaken, costs for goods and services continuing to rise throughout the Silver State. As a result, our small businesses are many of them are forced to increase their prices just to make ends meet. With the challenging times that they're facing, it's becoming difficult for them to obtain affordable financing to help start new businesses, expand businesses, or hire more people. I have been really focused on my time here in the legislature to try to bring down costs for Nevada families, and we've certainly already introduced and already enacted some bills this session to do that. But we do need ways to help our small businesses. They are the drivers of our state's economy. We need to help them grow and thrive in this challenging economic time. So broadly, if you look at it this way, I think Assembly Bill 427 really can be seen as a jobs bill. It's a bill that's focused on providing small businesses with the resources they need to build stronger and more resilient organizations going forward. So the genesis of this bill, obviously the NCIC already existed in law, but this provision allowing the expansion of the investment opportunities is modeled after legislation passed in New Mexico in 2022. They created a venture capital fund that would assist local businesses for startup expansion and early stage development. AB 427 that you have in front of you seeks to modernize our existing NCIC for Nevada in the following ways. And I've covered a little bit of this, but I want to go over it because I think it's important. Here's how it modernizes the NCIC. Number one, it shifts the focus from providing purely late-stage investments to providing early-stage and middle-stage funding to businesses to assist with seed funding, startup funding, and early growth funding, as well as expansion costs. Two, it better aligns the focus of investments of the NCIC with the state's economic development plan developed by the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So it encourages collaboration between different branches of government, or at least different divisions within the state branch, the same branch of government. AB 427 then allows the Board of Directors, which oversees the NCIC, to invest directly into Nevada businesses or through qualified venture capital firms to avoid paying exorbitant management fees from private equity firms. And I think Mr. Sailing will touch on that point a little bit more. If this is not your world, I know that this stuff can sound confusing, but he's going to distill it in a really nice way for you in just a little bit. And then finally, AB 427 ensures that businesses that are eligible to receive funding under this program are located in Nevada or in the process of relocating here, are actively hiring Nevada workers, providing high wages and benefits to their workers, and are committed to advancing the legislature's previously approved environmental sustainability policies. Overall, the changes in this proposal will make it so that Nevada's emerging businesses can access capital to help them expand and hire more people. I'm also very thankful that we can refocus funds that have been previously authorized by the legislature through the state's permanent school fund, so this bill will not impose any new fiscal impact on our state's general fund if the committee wishes to move forward. With that, Chair Considine, I want to ask your advice. I could walk through the bill very quickly if you like, or I could hand it over to Mr. Sailing, or I could hand it over to Mr. Sailing and then walk through the bill.
Absolutely your choice, but if you wanted to go to Mr. Sailing first to get some more context before going through the bill.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Yeager for the record. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Sailing, and then I'll do a quick, very quick walk through the bill for you.
Thank you, Speaker Yeager, and good morning, Chair Considine, Vice Chair Wynn, and members of the committee. I'm Jeff Sailing, S-A-L-I-N-G, for the record. I am the co-founder of an organization called Startup NV. It's a statewide business accelerator and incubator. I also am a general partner at two venture capital funds called Fund NV and 1864. I usually have to explain that, but I don't think I have to explain that to anybody in this room. I'm also co-president of the Sierra Angels, and since 2021, our group of investors has invested $11.2 million into 23 Nevada startups. And that amount of money, that $11.9 million, is currently worth almost $55 million. So we've done a pretty good job of finding these businesses, investing in them, and then seeing them succeed and get marked up. And we've talked with NCIC along the way to please either invest alongside us or invest in some of these businesses. And I wish they had. Nevada Battle-Born Growth Escalator Fund has. And so hopefully they've seen some of the same increases that we've seen. I think it's really important that this bill be passed or considered for being passed, because it would not only support the same work that we're doing in finding and investing in these startups, and we are very happy to share when we discover something. You know, we're venture capitalists, so we go out and find these businesses that we think are going to grow, and because we're focused only on Nevada, it's really consistent with what we do. And hopefully, not only will the business benefit, but the state fund will benefit as well. If we're making good decisions and the members of the board of that fund are making good decisions, whether they're investing alongside somebody like us or other people who do what we do, I think you're going to get not only the jobs and the funding that Speaker Yeager talked about, but you're going to get a nice increase in the fund size, which can go about doing all of the things that fund is supposed to do in the future. So I fully support this bill. I would really like to see it in place. I like the fact that it's going on and sort of changing the oversight of the bill from a more academic situation where you've got the NSHE chairperson sort of being on the board and overseeing it, and changing that or including the executive director of economic development and really aligning it with the state's economic development plan to diversify our economy. So you've got this really interesting marriage of, doing a good job with venture capital and at the same time, expanding the availability of capital for our Nevada businesses, whether that be at the very earliest stages in pre-seed and seed, which is where I generally operate, and then to the stages that go beyond that, because it specifies that those are the stages of capital that should be considered. So, Speaker Yeager, hopefully I've added the color that you had hoped I would, and I'm ready to help answer questions.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Yeager for the record. I think that it was helpful to hear just what kind of opportunities there are for the state in terms of the return. I mean, right now, these investments are relatively safe investments. That's good, right? It assures that we're going to get a return, but there's much more opportunity out there. And I will note, just in case to preempt some questions, I know the State Permanent School Fund may not be something you're all familiar with, but it is basically a trust fund of sorts that exists in the state, and it's primarily funded by fines that are collected under our criminal law. And so I tried to do a little bit of research on this. We don't have really up-to-date data. As some of you know, some of the financial statements coming out of the controller's office have been delayed, not through a fault of the controller, but just anyway, the most recent information I was able to find back about 2 years ago, the balance of that fund is about $500 million. It may be higher now, waiting for that updated information. And the way it works is it's a trust fund, but the interest earnings off of the permanent school fund actually go into to funding our schools. So they go into the distributive school account. So every dollar that we're able to make and put into this fund that generates interest, that's more money that we can put into our schools. So, as many of you know, you can invest in very safe things that provide a slow and steady return. But most people don't invest that way, especially if you're young. You're supposed to be a little bit more aggressive and try to get, that 11, 12, 13% return, and I think, as Mr. Stelling would say, sometimes a much bigger return than that. Chair, before I go through the bill, I did just want to note, I had the opportunity to attend a convening out in Rancho Mirage, California, right before session started, and it was a convening about entrepreneurship and how to inspire more entrepreneurship in our country to get back to, the founding of our country back 250 years ago when we were indeed a startup nation and everything was new here. There were a lot of very accomplished folks in that room who have done very well as entrepreneurs, and we had a couple of days of roundtable discussions, and what I heard loud and clear from people in that room was access to capital is the #1 barrier to people starting a business. Sure, there are other things that impact them, business regulations, complexities, but we have programs to help with that. What we don't have is access to capital in this state. And if we want to inspire Nevadans to start their own businesses, or if we want to encourage some folks who have businesses in our neighboring states, one of them to the west that is very large, the more that we have the ability to fund these things through early and mid-stage capital, we're going to be able to compete. So that really is the genesis of the bill. I wanted to flesh that out a little bit. And Chair, just for the record, I'll take just a couple quick minutes to go through the sections of the bill. Hopefully the explainer helped, and then we'll be happy to answer questions. So Section 1 of the bill revises the focus of the NCIC by stating that businesses who are eligible to receive funding must have an active presence in Nevada, must be engaged in an industry that is consistent with the state's economic development plan, and must be in the need of early stage or middle stage funding to help expand the business's operations. Section 2 of the bill allows for the NCIC to provide venture capital funding to businesses and revises the membership of the board to replace the chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education with the executive director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And Mr. Sailing, I think, provided good reasons for why we would want to do that in terms of wanting to make wise investments. Section 3 provides the board of directors to make direct investments into eligible businesses as well as through qualified venture capital investment firms. Additionally, Section 3 ensures that investments from the NCIC are diversified so that not all of the funding is provided to just one or two businesses, because that's risky to have all of your funding in one or two businesses. You need to spread the wealth. I'll be candid, Chair, not all these investments are going to pan out. They're not. That's just the nature of the world that we live in. If you check your stocks every day, you're going to see that some of them are not panning out. But if you diversify enough, you're going to have a return in the long run, and I think that's borne out by Mr. Sailing. I think he'd tell you not all the businesses they've invested in have been successful, but when you look at the whole of how they've invested, they have been successful and provided quite a bit of return. Additionally, Section 3 ensures that businesses will be prioritized for funding if they meet the following criteria. If they employ Nevada residents, this means jobs. If they provide jobs that are in high demand and pay high wages to local residents, this means good jobs. If they provide health insurance coverage to their employees, this maybe has never been more pressing than it is at this moment in our state's history to have health insurance provided by your employer, because we don't know about the state's ability to continue to provide that. If they advance environmental sustainability policies that have been advanced by the legislature, i.e. water conservation, i.e. fire mitigation. If the funding would enable the business to create new jobs, and if the funding would help support new and expanding businesses here in Nevada. That's Section 3. Section 4 and 5 of the bill are conforming sections to ensure the NCIC can provide venture capital funding to businesses as opposed to just private equity funding. And finally, Sections 6 through 9 are cleanup sections that were identified by our legal division and the LCB that are designed to remove references to obsolete programs that were originally contemplated back in 2011 and would no longer be necessary if this bill moves forward. So, Chair, I think that is the entirety of the presentation. I will admit it a little longer than I anticipated it would be, but I appreciate Mr. Sailing coming up and providing some flavor, and we would be happy to answer any questions the committee might have about Assembly Bill 427.
Thank you for that presentation. We will start our questions with Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. I think it's a very good idea for the state to focus on this potential market for the permanent school fund. I think by changing the focus from venture capital to where the bill's going now, I see you're changing the board by removing the NSHE chancellor and adding, I think it's GOED, economic development. Is that enough expertise to be able to deal with the new type of investments, the new type of businesses, and the states of those businesses to ensure, to maximize the potential for a return for the state?
Steve Yeager, for the record, I think it's a good start, right? Because for example, in the bill, it says we need to align with GOED's economic plan. So having that of GOED makes a lot of sense here. I should note there are other board members as well. So our state treasurer is a board member just by statute. That's an automatic appointee. And then there are other appointments that happen through legislative leadership. So right now there are five other members, and so I think through that appointment process, the goal is to try to find people that operate in this universe and can provide good advice. There is one board member, Ash Merchandani, who actually has been on the board since it was created. So we have someone who's been on the board the entire time, and so I think I'm open to suggestions about what we should do with that board, but I think it has worked relatively well. Admittedly, we're changing the focus of the board, so I'm certainly willing to consider additional appointments or additional slots. I do want to make sure the board remains manageable, which I think it is now. I think it's 6 or 7 people total, which is a pretty good number rather than having a bigger board. So open to suggestions for sure, Assembly Member.
Thank you for that response. No, I'm not suggesting to expand it. I've been on too many boards. You don't want them to be big. That's never a good functioning environment. So. Glad to have further discussions offline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Goulding.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the interesting proposal. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the selection criteria. So I see that there's the eligibility requirements in the bill, and I'm thinking about risk assessment and risk thresholds, and probably even more importantly, equitable distribution. I'm wondering if you can flesh that out a little bit.
Steve Yeager for the record. It's a good question. What I wanted to try to do is not be too prescriptive, but I anticipate what would happen is, the board would sort of do what they do now, right? They meet and decide where to invest, but with this new focus, I think that would be a board of directors decision to look at sort of what's out there, to collaborate with folks like Mr. Sailing who operate in this universe, to decide, number one, how to spread that investment in a way that mitigates risk, but also to do that equitably. And so, Chair, if you would allow, I think Mr. Sailing could probably address that because he makes those kind of decisions in investing, and just talk a little bit about how you envision that working, having worked with a lot of the folks who are on the board of directors.
Thank you, Speaker Yeager. A venture capital fund generally has a thesis, and different funds have different theses. For instance, our fund looks for capital-efficient companies that have high tech kind of at their core. And so we look for companies that fit that model. And for us, they also have to be Nevada companies. So I expect that NCIC's fund would probably have a bit of a broader thesis than that. They probably would have thesis along different stages of capital, very early stage, kind of middle stage, and a little later stage. And they'll also want to consider what we call the power law in venture capital investing that says kind of what Speaker Yeager said, where you know that as you invest in a cohort of 20 or 30 companies, 3 or 4 of those companies, they're going to crush it, right? They're going to go crazy and return the fund or make a very, very high return. There's going to be a few that fail, and some that are somewhere in the middle. And you know that no matter how well you do your due diligence, no matter how well you search for companies and try to find things you think are going to return, that life happens and things don't go as planned. So whatever the board decides their thesis is going to be, they will follow that and adjust it as necessary as new technologies and new things come along that may impact what it is that they do. 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about AI as a core thesis for an investment fund. Now, it's very much at the center of things. So having a board that's experienced, that can develop a thesis, put it out there, maintain it over time is going to be critical. And I think by picking the right people on the board, it will create its thesis and speak to some of those very things that you were concerned about.
Sorry, would you please state your name for the record?
Oh, sorry, Jeff Sailing, for the record, S-A-L-I-N-G.
And Chair Steve Yeager, can I just add really quick to, there's a couple options for us here. If you'd like to see additional guardrails around that, one option would be to actually put something in the bill language, which of course, if we do that, then if we want to change it, a new legislature has to come and change it. There's also regulations around the NCIC that have been and will be promulgated by the Treasurer's Office. So some of that, in terms of guardrails or factors to consider risk mitigation or equity, could be done through the regulatory process as well. And I expect that would happen most likely if this bill gets passed. It's something we could put in here specifically to ask that regulations be enacted. But the regulatory process gives us a little bit more flexibility. As Mr. Sailing says, we don't know what the world is going to bring. I don't know that we knew that AI was coming in the way. It's been here for a long time, but we didn't know about the advancements that were coming. So it would allow a little bit more flexibility. But I'm certainly happy to have additional discussions about whether you'd like to see something in the bill, whether you want us to mandate that there be some regulations, because I think that is an important consideration. We know it's not going to go to just a couple businesses because the bill says it can't, but how it's equitably distributed, I think, is an important conversation for us to have.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Lost part of my speaker here. I appreciate that suggestion or consideration. I'm thinking about oversight and accountability and how important that will be. Certainly, I imagine the board would be formed in a way that you would expect accountability, but you certainly would want to see that if we go off the rails, if it's in inequitable distribution, whatever. I think accountability is critical with the public funds. The question would be, can you envision incorporating that in?
Steve Yeager, for the record. Yes, I mean the main goal of this, of course, is to make money for the state. I mean that is the mission of the NCIC to bring money back into the permanent school fund, which funds our schools. But I think accountability, and by the way, you can go, NCIC has a website now, you can go and take a look. I didn't provide a link to that, but they actually have all their financial statements, all the returns over the years, so that is available. It's a state website, it's through the treasurer's office. If you just search, I would search the whole name, not NCIC, but it'll come up, and so all their information is public. Obviously, accountability is crucial here, and I think a way to look at this as well is, I mean, these are investments that aren't happening right now, right? We know what the investments that are being made now, so this, I think, opens up the opportunity. If you think about these businesses, just don't have this access, so it's hard to know exactly what the demand will be. But I could see a scenario, not this session, but if this committee passes this bill and it gets enacted, maybe we come back in future sessions and we say, look, $75 million isn't enough. Maybe we can use 100 or 150 million of that permanent school fund, depending on how it goes. Obviously, we have to make sure we're being fiscally responsible, but I just see this as a win all the way around to be able to invest in some of these businesses, Nevada jobs. But yeah, they're going to have to be accountable like anybody else. So, if they give a financial statement and they're losing all the investments, then it's going to be a time for a shakeup. I don't think that'll happen just because of the diversity of the investments and the diversity of those who are on the board.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Saling, for bringing this bill to us for consideration. I think it's an excellent idea. I just had a two-part question. So I know that there were some funds that are affiliated with this investment sort of schemata. One was a startup NV, the 1864 fund was another one. So my question is, are there any other funds that are affiliated, with this program? And then also, is there an application process for businesses to apply for the funds, or is it something that the board will select as in terms of which businesses will be eligible, and then also therefore be programs that they want to invest in? Thank you.
Steve Yeager, for the record. So yeah, I think the couple of funds that Mr. Saling mentioned, I mean, right now we can't invest in those funds. They're not allowed to. But this bill would open up the door for instance, if the NCIC said, we don't know if we want to do the work of actually looking at each business, but it would allow them to invest in a fund like the one that Mr. Saling has, because they're doing all the work, right? It keeps the cost down. So I don't think there's a limit on what could be invested in, but it has to have that Nevada focus, right? So the two he's talking about make a lot of sense. I think the 1864, and I can't remember the other one. Fund NV, because those are specifically Nevada, but the bill doesn't say which funds, and the board could decide to do their own research and look at all the companies. They don't have to do that, but so there are no restrictions there in terms of, as long as it meets the criteria, the NCIC could invest either directly or through a fund that invests in those businesses. I don't know off the top of my head the answer to your second question about how business ventures or opportunities come to NCIC. So I'll have to get back to you on that. I do anticipate, because this is a new wrinkle, if we add this, that there'll probably be some regulations around how that information would come to the board. I just don't know enough about how it operates now. So let me get some information, probably from the treasurer, because I think he is the on the board of directors and has been there for a while. So I'll get that information for you from him, and I'll get back to the committee with that.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. It's really interesting. My only question, there's a mention about GoEd's economic development plan, and I just want to make sure we're able to always see the alignment between the two and how they influence one another, and thank you for having the report in there. And this isn't on you, this is just note of mention, because the last plan that I can find on the website for the state is like the 2012 to 2014 one. So, and which talks about how costs coming out of the recession, the housing recession. So it'd be good to just be able to see what is influencing how NCIC, if this bill passes, is doing the work it's doing, and how that does continuously align with the state. So it's maybe a request to mention.
Steve Yeager, for the record. I believe I have a meeting with GoEd this afternoon, actually, or maybe it's tomorrow. I know they're on my calendar this week, so we have a number of things to talk about, and that's one that we'll talk about too. My guess is there's probably an updated plan, and maybe it's just not where it needs to be, but I'll get that information. And obviously, they're going to be critical to making this work, so appreciate the suggestion, and I'll have that conversation either today or tomorrow.
Thank you. Our next question is back to Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to follow up on one of my colleagues' line of questioning. I think accountability is critical, and I'm assuming that's there with the board. That's their job. But the concept of including equity in the bill, equity being equal outcomes, is, I think, when you're doing financial investments, is absolutely the wrong approach. You want to get the best companies that meet the business portfolio you're trying to match. And so I think we need to stay focused on that because we want a return on investment for the permanent fund and thus the school systems funding. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve Yeager, for the record, I don't disagree with you. I think when I think about equity, I think of it in terms of everyone's got an equal chance to be heard and to apply and to be reviewed. Doesn't mean they would be selected because, again, the purpose of this fund is to make money for the state. So, and I did want to note, I just got some real-time information that I think will answer Assemblymember De Silva's question in part, that right now there is a very robust application process for folks who are seeking NCIC investment. There is due diligence that has to be done by the board, but I can get some of that for you, and I anticipate we would do something similar here, whether it's from a company directly or from an investment fund. But to Assemblymember DeLong, this is not a slush fund to try to fund things that you like. This is a fund that's intended to help create jobs, to help businesses, and to make money for the state. So I think that would certainly be part of the criteria, although it would be important to me to make sure that there is some kind of application process where folks can make their case. And if the investment doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense for the state because these are, bottom line is these are taxpayer dollars, and so we have to be responsible with them.
Thank you. And our last question is from Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Speaker. As a small business owner, I really appreciate this effort as we try to move our state forward. Small business is truly the backbone of our community, so thank you both for this definitely effort. I was just talking in terms of business and in terms of recruitment and retention and obviously diversifying the way we do things in Nevada. I know the intention of the bill is to put GoEd into conversation, but one of the important things to the constituent I represent is also the educational factor, right? In terms of keeping the beat within what's going on out there, what's the trends, what all of these awesome AI things and exciting things coming in. So I don't know if it's possible, Speaker, to keep including the educational component, whether it's an ex officio non-voting member or so that they can still be in the conversation so that we can continue to look at how we can grow our state in terms of talents so that when these investments come through, that they have a beat within the conversation and we're on the same page and kind of educating Nevadans in a better way.
Steve Yeager, for the record, thank you for the suggestion. I think certainly open to that. I think another, let me get some more information about how the board functions now, because I would anticipate in terms of their due diligence that they reach out to other sectors to figure out what's going on. But I think your suggestion would work. Maybe the suggestion of having some kind of a smaller advisory committee that's not voting, but sort of keeps wraps on what's going on. I think those are all good suggestions. I mean, the bottom line is we want this to be cutting edge, right? We want to invest in the things that are not here today, but will be here tomorrow or the day after. So I think the more input we can get, the better. Realizing we want to keep the board at a manageable size, but I think there are ways we can accomplish that. And certainly appreciate the suggestion.
Great. Thank you so much. We will now move on to testimony. Again, testimony can be provided in person here in Carson City via video conference in Las Vegas or over the phone, and further instructions for providing testimony on a bill can be found on the agenda. We will begin testimony here in Carson City. If you would like to testify in support of AB 427, please go ahead when you are ready.
Chair, members of the committee, my name is Yoanna Ontiveros, Yoanna Ontiveros, with Kara, Nevada, on behalf of the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, the state's largest regional economic development agency serving all over Clark County and focused on scalable startups and tech entrepreneurs. The LVGEA appreciates Speaker Yeager's proposal and supports AB 427. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Considine and members of the committee. For the record, Randy Robinson, Director of Government Affairs for the City of Las Vegas. City of Las Vegas is in support of this bill. We appreciate the new focus, the update to the board, and the exciting opportunities ahead. I'll date myself a little bit and say that I was here in 2011 when this bill was, or when this NCIC was first enacted. I was here a couple of sessions before that as the discussion was going along, understand why it was created, and have kept tabs on it since, and appreciate the return that we've received, particularly because the point that the speaker made, this helps generate interest, more interest for the Permanent School Fund, which helps go back into our education funding, which I have a soft spot for. And so for that reason and many others, we're in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in Carson City wishing to provide testimony in support of AB 427? Seeing no one in Las Vegas AVH, is there anyone on the line testifying in support for AB 427?
If you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 427, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. We will then move to testimony in opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to AB 427? Seeing no one approach and seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, we're back to you.
If you would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 427, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Barry Johnston, Las Vegas, BERRYJOHNSTON, in strong opposition to AB 427. This bill embodies everything wrong with our government and everything un-American about Steve Yeager and his band of bureaucratic think. This is that they want to gamble our children's future on business that real venture capitalists are already funding every day. Why should we risk public money when those willing to take the risk with their own walls are already in the room? Let's be honest, venture capitalists are gamblers, and that's perfectly fine, but you are gambling with our lives, our future, and our money in the game that's rigged for your cronies. This isn't innovation. This is crony capitalism, a twisted blend of socialism and insider corruption wrapped in shiny buzzwords like economic development. At the center of this machine, Steve Yeager, a man who wants to pose as a visionary while acting like a parasite, feeding off Nevada taxpayers, bleeding our future dry and calling it investment. Let me remind you, real leadership doesn't require subsidies. A few years ago, the federal government handed out tens of billions through the CHIP Act, but under real leadership, President Trump said no more handouts, and what happened? Manufacturers invested anyway because tariffs and economy strength work better than socialism. Over $4 trillion in global capital is now pouring into the United States without one dime of government subsidies. Meanwhile, Nevada is being passed over. Why? Because this legislature, because of you, have created a toxic business environment. Businesses fleeing California and other predatory states aren't landing here because of your overregulation, your green agenda mandates, and your idiotic energy policies that have driven prices up, not down. If AB 427 passes, it's just another nail in the coffin for Nevada's economy. No free market entrepreneur wants to set up shop in a socialist swamp run by unaccountable cronies using other people's money. You want to be a venture capitalist? Great.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Yeager,
that's your
do
2
Nevada
minutes.
a
Would you
favor.
please
Quit the
wrap it up?
legislature
Thank
and
you.
Go raise your money with your quit the legislature and go raise money with your buddies in the private sector. Don't you dare steal ours. Thank you.
Hello, this is Al Rojas from Assembly District 12, Senate District 21, last name is spelled R-O-J-A-S. You know, the person who just testified before me, I have to agree with many of the things that he says. You know, going in there and playing gambling with our kids' money when you really didn't give enough statistics on the success of this. Venture capital, startup businesses, we know most of them fail. And I don't really think there's enough regulation to increase success. You're gambling with our kids' future. We're really already way behind on education. And what you should be doing is doing what the state, what Henderson is doing, investing on kids preschool to grade. You can't arrest everybody, and you can't throw everybody in jail. You can't throw everybody in jail, and you can't throw the criminals out on the street. That's what LA County tried to do. Okay? What you got to do is create law-abiding citizens. And how do you do that? By getting kids to read. As a matter of fact, you can determine how many jails you need by the amount of the kids that can't read by the third grade. That's the way it used to be. But right now, there's so many kids that can't read, you'd have to put a jail almost in every county or every assembly district. So what we need to be doing is focusing on getting our kids to read, leave those kids' money alone, go get your money from somewhere else, and let's start building more preschools, okay, apart from the school district, and if you are going to be funding the school district, do earmark funding. I totally ditto what the other guy said, and I am totally against this bill. And, you know, I don't want to say anything. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. We have no additional callers in opposition.
Thank you. We will now move on to anyone wishing to testify in neutral on the bill. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral on AB 427? Seeing no one and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, AV8, we're back to you. Anyone on the line to testify in neutral?
The public line is open and working. We have no callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you. Would the presenter like to give any final remarks?
Thank you, Chair. Steve Yeager. For the record, I think very rarely in the legislature do we have an opportunity like this where we're not raising taxes on anybody. We're using money that is already in trust in the permanent school fund, which is largely funded through criminal fines. And we're allowing the state to expand investment options. And the outcome of that is more money for our public schools. So I think this is a unique opportunity for the state and one that we ought not to pass up. So I would ask for your favorable consideration for Assembly Bill 427, and obviously willing to work with any folks on the committee who had questions or concerns. I just think back to, you know, what if we had had this in place back when some of these mega corporations were just an idea in somebody's mind, the IBMs, the AOLs, the Amazons, the Facebooks of the world. I think if all of us could go back in time and invest some money in those stocks, we would do that, right? And you just never know in the world today, like whether that next company is already here in Nevada operating or whether they want to come operate here in Nevada. So this gives us an opportunity to do that, Chair, and appreciate the robust discussions and appreciate those who called in to weigh in on the bill as well. I hope you all have a great morning. Thanks for entertaining me in Assembly Government Affairs.
Thank you. And I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 427, and I'm going to take a 1-minute recess. Okay, we are back from recess. We do have a BDR to introduce this morning. We will now introduce BDR 25-1036, which revises provisions relating to governmental administration. Remember, voting in favor of introducing a BDR does not imply a commitment to supporting the measure later. All this action does is to allow the BDR to become a bill and enter the legislative hearing process. I will now entertain a motion to introduce BDR number 25-1036.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Nguyen made the motion. The second came from Assembly Member Carter. Are there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries. We will now move on to the last item on our agenda, and that is public comment. Public comment is not an opportunity to rehear testimony on a bill, and we ask that you please keep your public comment topics within the jurisdiction of this committee. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person or telephonically and may submit public comment up to 24 hours after the meeting. Instructions for providing public comment can be found on the agenda. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 888-475-4499. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 821-4807-3398, and then press pound when prompted for a participant ID. Each person will have 2 minutes to provide testimony. You may also submit written public comment to the committee, again, up to 24 hours after the hearing. Please remember to clearly state and spell your name for the record. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? Seeing no one? Seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the line to provide public comment today?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Hello, this is Al Rojas, Assembly District 12, Senate District 21. I wanted to address 2 quick issues. One of them is regarding software development. The other one is neighborhood watch groups. First of all, my recommendation is if you guys are presented with some kind of a software development project, they got to send you a spec, and they got to send you the security issues and the screens, and they should be providing you email and talk to the software developers. So, there's one time that I made a comment and I didn't hear the beginning of the bill, and I got so angry at what the presentation that I heard. It was so unprofessional that I might have spoken out, but I just wanted to say that. The other thing is regarding neighborhood watch groups. I'm having a lot of success working with this, but I did make a comment that I want to clarify yesterday, and that is regarding security committees. I asked for to have a security committee that will give you, and I want to clarify, not a document where you can trespass somebody and act like a policeman, a document that you can present to the law enforcement so they can get people off of community property. You can literally just walk into any HOA, and that, especially you guys that are assemblymen who are being asked, of the security issues in your community. There's so many HOAs. You could walk in there. So one of your concerned neighbors says, we got a lot of problems going on. You could go, hey, go start a neighborhood watch group, and you could petition your HOA that says, you know what, I want to step up. And somebody like me, who's part of the National Neighborhood Watch Program and who's been engaged in this, I could go in there and get them up and going. That's how we got started. We were having people coming into our HOA. We talked to Metro. They came down to our pool. They sent an email. That's the cool thing. The HOA sent an email. 30 people showed up. 3 of us stepped up as neighborhood watch groups. And in 2.5 weeks, we cleared out everything within our wall. 2 years later, when somebody got external to our walls on our landscaping, we stepped it up, and now we're networked with all the businesses in our area. And we will soon be working more with Metro to every week going or every
Thank
2
you,
weeks.
Mr. Rojas. We appreciate your public comment. Your 2 minutes has been used. Thank you.
Chair, we have no additional callers for public comment.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, March 26th at 8 a.m. in room 4100. That concludes our meeting for today. The meeting is adjourned.